Welcome to this mini React practice course. My name is Fernando and I will be your guide. So this mini course is for everyone. You need to know a little bit of React for web, and since this is going to be a simple beginner's project, you don't need to know a lot of React Native. We will learn everything on the go. So we are going to create a tiny application where we can enter a list of players, and at the end we get the player that will pay the bill. So this is going to be just a simple project so you can get started with React Native. All right, so let's begin. All right, so welcome back in on this one. I'm going to give you a tiny overview of what we are going to do. So when the application starts, of course, we get this the first screen. So we're going to work with two different screens, the stage 1 and the stage 2. This is the final code. So, of course, we need to install fonts and we need to work with fonts. We need to work with inputs and icons. So we will install React Native Elements, just a library that we're going to use with React Native. And then, of course, we're going to work with buttons. Of course, we need to do a little bit of validation, right? So we're going to work with formic just to get a nice validation right here at the bottom. So then, of course, if I want to add a name, for example, let's say that the name is going to be Ron, just like this, Ron. I'm going to add the player. And that one is going to be added to the list. So we are going to use a context just to handle the whole state of the application. Now, of course, since we need to get a loser from a list of players, maybe with one single player, just makes no sense. So we're going to validate that and we're going to show toasts at the bottom. Right. So you need at least 2 players. So, we're going to go and add one more. Okay. So when I add Mike, we get 2 players. So now when we get loser, we're going to get one of the losers. So we're going to get a random player of that list. So we can try again, or we can start the application over. So it's going to be a very simple application, but still, it's going to take a lot of work. We need to do a lot of things. All right. So first, the first thing we need to do, we need to create an application. So we're going to go to the next section, and we are going to use React Native, create React Native app. We're going to use the Expo one. This is the one I like to use. So we're going to do npx create React Native app just to create the application. So let's go to the next section and let's start building all of this. All right, so welcome back. And so let's begin with the installation. We need to install a lot of things. So the first thing we need to do is to create a project. So this is the create React Native app. This is the library I like to use to create a native application. So right now I'm inside the directory I want, which is called code. Right? So I'm going to go to terminal and I'm going to do npx create React Native app. And then of course I need to provide the name of the application. So on this one, I'm going to call it, I don't know, who pays bill, something like that. Of course, you can choose whatever name you wish. So this is going to take a little while. I'm going to press enter and I'll be right back. Oh, of course, it's going to ask if you want to use a template with this create React Native app. I'm going to use the default new app. All right. All right, so everything was installed. Now, before I can start running all of this, we're going to install a few dependencies that we're going to use. So for now, I'm just going to do clear and go right here. So the first library that we will need to install, it's called the React Native Elements. So we're going to use this one. So of course, if you go to React Native Elements and you go to read the docs, the first thing we need to talk about is the getting started and the installation. So we need to install this one, and notice it says the Expo or create React Native app, a project to include React Native vector icons. So we are using that, but sometimes we just don't get it. So when we install this library, we need to do an additional step. That's what we need to do. Now notice I'm inside code, which is the library. Inside the who pays bill, we get the project. So I'm going to go and say cd who pays and then bill. So we need to be inside that directory. All right. So the first thing we need to do is npm install React Native Elements. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to press enter. All right. So everything was installed. So I'm going to go back and read the documentation. This is the first step. And then it says install React Native vector icons. So this is a library, a third-party library. It's not part of React Native vector elements, React Native Elements, but this library uses this one. So we need to install this one as well. So I'm going to go right here and it says npm install -- save React Native vector icons. We are going to need to copy that and go right here and just, install that as well. So then it says link. Well, right now, of course, React, the new versions of React, they already do auto linking. But for iOS, we need to do pod install. So don't worry, I'm going to show you how to do it. Once we are here, notice that we get Android and iOS directory. So I'm going to do clear. I'm going to do CD and iOS. And once we are inside the iOS directory, we need to do pod install. And that's it. This is going to go and set all the icons and everything else for the iOS simulator. Right, so once everything's done, I'm going to do clear, and don't forget to go back to your main directory, your root. Okay, so this is pretty much done. Of course, we're going to use it in a few sections. Another thing we are going to need, it's Formix, so we can add a little bit of validation. Now, of course, you can go to the get started and, see how you can install it and everything else. So this is super simple. We need to do npm install Formic and save. And Formic works with a third-party library called Yup. I'm going to go and install that as well because we are going to use it. So I'm going to press enter. It's going to take just a minute. All right, so everything was installed. So I'm going to go and do clear. And of course, we're going to use these libraries. And if we have a problem on the installation, we're going to fix them on the go. So for now, the only thing I want to do, I want to run this React Native application. I just want to run and get the message, open up.js, just get the initial message and see if this works. Now, of course, we need to run the simulators. Now, of course, if you're in Windows, you cannot run the iOS simulator. You just cannot, because you cannot run iOS native applications on Windows. That's, just the way it is. So we can run Android, and with this library, with the Create React Native app, we need to do npm run and then Android. That's it. That's what we need to do. Android. Right, and of course, if you don't remember, right here you get it on the script, npm run Android, and then we need to go and do npm run iOS so we can build the iOS simulator. So for now, first I'm going to do Android. Now, this is going to take a little while. Running the simulators and everything else takes a little while, so be patient. I'm going to press enter and be right back whenever this is done. All right, so the Android is working. We get the application going, so we are ready to start, creating the application. Now, of course, I'm on a Mac, and I'm gonna go and run the iOS simulator. Remember, if you're a Windows user, you cannot do npm run iOS. Just not gonna work. So npm run iOS. I'm gonna open the iOS simulator. Now, this one takes quite a while, so I'm gonna, of course, run it. Wait until this is done, and be right back. All right, so iOS and Android, they are both working. So now we can start creating something. So let's go to the next section and we're going to start building the application. All right, so welcome back and let's begin with some coding. So this is what we need to achieve again. So we have two main screens. The main one when the application loads, which is going to be this one. And once we get enough players, when we do get looser, we're going to go to the other screen. So right from the start, we have two different screens, okay? All right. So then, of course, we need to store the users on some place because maybe we can put it on a store or in a state. And later, that state, that store needs to be part of the second screen. So we need a centralized place where both components can get data from. All right, so we're going to do that. We're going to create the two stages, the two screens, and then we're going to go and create the context. So right now I'm going to go to this to the project, and I'm going to create a source directory. Of course, you can call this whatever you want. Now inside, I'm going to create a components directory. I'm going to call it just components. And later we're going to add context. So I'm going to go to the source directory again, and I'm going to create a folder called context. And we're going to put all the everything that got to do with the context right here. So right here on the context, I'm going to call it index.html, index.js, of course. And then I'm going to go to components. And remember, we have two stages, two screens. So the first stage, I'm going to call it stage 1.js and then stage 2.js. So of course, you can call this whatever you want. It's just completely up to you. All right. So when the application starts, right now we are just getting this. Now notice that we are using a functional component. In this case, I'm gonna use a class-based component. You can still do the same with a functional component, but just to show you that we can do classes and we can do functional components, I'm gonna use just a dump class. I'm gonna go right here. I'm gonna change how this looks. I'm gonna do class. This is still gonna be app, and right here I'm gonna do extends, and then I'm gonna do component, right? The usual stuff. So I'm going to go right here. And of course, we need to render something instead of just returning. So I'm going to go and say render, open and close, just like this. And then, of course, we're going to return something, right? So hopefully you do have some experience with React and I don't need to do a lot of explaining right here. Now, of course, right now we get the class, but we are not exporting it. So export, then default, all right, and then of course the app class, and the error goes away. Now, of course, we are just not doing anything, and I'm calling the status bar, so I'm not going to use it. All right, so we are pretty much where we had before, right? Okay, so now we have a view, and notice that the way on React Native, if you don't have some experience on React Native, is the way we define styles. It's by using this style sheet create, this component that we are importing from React Native. So again, just to render views or to render something on the screen, or maybe to render a piece of text, we need to do it through the React Native components. That's why we get style sheet, we get text, and we get view. All right, I'm not going to do a lot of explanation because remember, this is a free tiny course that you get on Udemy. So I can only upload 2 hours of content. So I need to, of course, if we create the application and I do an explanation of everything, 2 hours is just not enough. Okay, so we're just going to go and create the application and learn by doing. That's the main point. All right, so now what I want to do, I want to create a context. Now, we don't have a context. We have it right here. All right. So if you remember, just to create a context, you need to at least import React from React. And on this one, I'm going to do a component again. And you're going to see why in a couple minutes. So I'm going to say component, just like this, and from then React. And I'm going to go right here. And I want to create a context. So I'm going to say const and then my context. Right. So everything that got to do with the context, this is the instance that we are creating for the context. So create context. Cool. Now, of course, if you know how the context works, is that every time you create a context, then you need to create a provider. And the provider will just pretty much wrap the whole application. So in this case, I'm going to create a class called my provider. Right. So my provider, you can use whatever name you wish. And I'm using a class because we are going to use this state in an easier way. On the rest of the components, we are just going to use a functional component. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to create a state right now. So remember, the application loads and we need to decide if we want to show the first screen or the second screen. So the state, I'm going to define this stage. So by default, when the application starts, we are going to be on the stage number 1, which is, this one, the one we have right here. And then, of course, as we move forward, when this changes, the application will swap screens. All right, so for now, we're going to be on stage number 1. Now, remember, we're going to need to loop the players and we need a centralized place to put the players. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to create an array. So here is where we're going to put the players. And at the end of the day, we need a place where we're going to be putting the result, right? We need to show the result. So I'm going to create a result. Cool. And of course, at the beginning, it's going to be empty. All right, so again, remember, right now we are creating a context, and at the end of the day, the provider will just pretty much wrap the whole application. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to create a render, and I'm going to be returning something. Cool. Now, of course, what I'm going to return is the actual provider wrapping the children's. So I'm going to go and say my context dot and then provider. Right. I'm going to say value, open and close. Now, if you don't know how the provider works in the context, how the context in React works, go to the YouTube channel. We spoke previously, and there's a section right there that explains how the context works. All right, so right now I'm just creating the provider. Now remember that, of course, the value on the provider needs to add something, which is going to be pretty much the centralized state. So for now, let me just close it. So this one, it's going to be what we are using right here. I'm going to go and I'm going to say that the state is going to be equal to that state, right? And then at the end of the day, remember the provider wraps the whole application. So I'm going to go and I'm going to say this.props the children. So now we can export this provider so we can use it on a different place, but we also need to export this. So I'm going to go right here. Let me just make it a little bit nicer. And I'm going to do export, open and close, and it's going to be my provider, and I'm going to export this one as well. And don't worry, we're going to test everything. We're going to see it working. But for now, we just have a state, an instance of the create context, and we are creating a provider that wraps something. Now, of course, since this is wrapping something, we need to decide what we want to wrap. So, of course, you should use this on a top level, right? On the pretty much the beginning of the application. So I'm going to go and I'm going to do it on the index.js because this is the main starting of our application. So I'm going to go right here at the top and I'm going to import React from React because we are going to use it in a minute. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to need to import. And remember, we need to wrap the app. So what we need to do, we need to import the provider, right? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the index one and I'm going to say import. I'm going to import the provider from, and of course, /src, and we're going to go to context. Cool. Right. So, of course, now what we need to do, we need to create something we can pass as a component. So provider, open and close, and this one at the end of the day, it's just going to return some JSX. Right. So remember, we need to wrap the app with the provider. So I'm going to say, okay, so this is my provider. It's going to be at the top of the application. And then inside the children is going to be the app. So since the provider, it's saying that pretty much everything that it's, all the children's of this ones will contain the state, the whole application gets the context, it gets access to the context. Right. So, just one thing less to do. Now, right now, of course, we are just passing on the register root component the app. So we need to put the provider instead. Now, maybe you're using a different way of creating the application, which is this one. Notice that right here, they give you a comment on this one. So instead of, if you have this right here, what you need to do instead of doing this is just doing this. All right, that's it. Notice that everything still works. Okay. All right, so now since the context it's flowing on the application, what I want to do, I want to go right here and start bringing the context, right? Start using it. So I'm going to say, okay, so this, I'm going to import my context. And of course, just to avoid typos, I'm going to go and bring the context. And notice that we are importing the context, not the provider. There's a difference. So I'm going to go and say from, and I'm going to say /src/ and then context. Cool. Now remember how the context, we can access the context on classes. We get a static property, just like this. And then, of course, we need to use the context type. There is no other way of doing it right now. I believe React is deprecating the other way. Okay, so now, of course, we get access to the context. Now, remember what we want to do. We want to check the state that it's inside the context to check on which stage we are. And if we are on stage number 1, we show the screen number 1. If we are in 2, we show the number 2. That's the point. All right, so I'm going to go right here to stage 1 and stage 2, and I'm going to return something super dumb because right now we just don't have a lot of code, right? Okay, so I'm going to go, and you know what? We can import some of the things we have right here. I'm going to go right here, go to stage number 1. I'm going to use on this one a functional component. We just don't need to use a class. And I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say const stage 1, right? And of course, this is going to be just a dump component. And at the end of the day, we're going to return something. So return. And you know what? What we could return, it's pretty much the same we have right here. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go and put it right here. Right. Of course, we're going to change all of this. And remember to delete the styles. And on this one, the only thing I'm going to do, I'm going to say stage 1. Right. Right. Of course, at the end of the day, we need to export, then we need to default, and we need to export default to stage 1. And notice that we're just not doing anything. We're just returning a view with some text inside. Now, of course, on the stage number 2, we need to do the same. So I'm going to go and say 2. Right. Stage number 2. Cool. And this one is going to be stage number 2. All right, so I'm going to save it. And of course, nothing happens because we are not importing them, but we're going to use the context type to show one or to show the other one. That's the whole point. Now, on React Native, if whatever content you're going to put right here goes outside of the viewport, you're not going to be able to scroll it. That's why notice that if I'm moving this, nothing is moving. I'm just clicking and dragging, and the screen, the text stays right in the middle. And it's because we need to import a component called the scroll view. So if you add enough content that will go outside of the viewport, you need to wrap everything with the scroll view. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to say that the scroll view is going to be the main component, and everything inside of the scroll view is going to be what we have right here. Right. Notice that the arrows goes away. Right. So notice right now that we get something different. Notice that we get the text right here at the top. Hopefully you can see it, and we get a nice momentum. Right. So now we have a scroll view. Of course, we are going to need to make some changes right here. So right now we have a view and the main style. So here, what I want to do is do something else. I'm going to say, all right, so if from within the context, we can check the state. So remember, this is the state. The stage. So I'm going to say, okay, so if we are on the this and then the context, and then we are on the state, remember we are passing this property state. So state and then stage, it's equal to 1, then we want to show the first component. Now, if it's equal to 2, we're going to show something else, right? So if it's 1, we go right here and show 1. And if it's 2, of course, we're going to go and show the 2, right? Of course, the application will fail because we are not returning anything. So I'm going to go right here at the top, and I'm going to start importing the stages. So I'm going to say stage 1 from that / src, I believe src, yes. And then components and stage 1. And I'm going to do pretty much the same, but it's going to be with stage 2. So stage 2. All right, let me just change it right here. All right, pretty done. So I'm going to go, just to make it better, just a little bit better, I'm going to go put it there. All right, so notice again, the applications fail. So if we are in stage number 1, we want to show the stage number 1. If not, we're going to go and show the stage number 2. So if we reload the application, notice that we get the stage number 1 right here at the top. Now, if you're on Android, you're going to get a different screen because you didn't have the up bar, so which is super cool in this case. But you get stage 1. All right, so what happens if I go to the stage and change it to the number 2? So the application reloads and we are in stage number 2, right? So everything so far it's working because it's accessing the context. So, okay, so now, of course, the rest of the work is going to be on stage 1 and stage 2. So we're going to start on stage 1. So I'm going to go and just go back to stage 1. Now, notice, of course, that this one is just super ugly, right? It's right here at the top. Well, what we need to do, we need to modify the styles. We need to provide better styles. So in this case, we are just saying that this view has the container style. Okay, so I'm going to go right here at the bottom. And I'm going to say, okay, so the flex is going to be 1. And on React Native, what we use, it's flex. Now, if you don't know how to use flex, let me show you something cool. Right, if you go to the web and you type React Native styling cheat sheet, you're going to find a GitHub project. And this dude made a list of all the different components and commands you get on the styling side of things. So you get all of them and you get a tiny description of what you can do, which is super useful, super useful. All right, of course, this is the name. Just go for it. Check it out. Now let's keep moving forward. Now, what I want to do, let me just show you again the final one. We want to do something like this. I do want to vertically align everything. Now, remember when we add the scroll views, a lot of the styles are going to change. That's why, everything is at the top. Now, my main problem is that since everything is at the very top, I want to add a little bit of margin because even though we can see something, we just cannot get it right here, right? So what we can do, we can just add a little bit of padding, right? That's it, just a little bit of padding for now. So I'm going to go and say, all right, so the padding top is going to be, 80. All right, so we get the text right here. Now we still need to do a lot of things. So we're going to go to the next section and start creating the title, the inputs, and everything else. So we're going to start working on the stage 1. All right, so welcome back. And on this one, we're going to start working on the stage number 1. So we're going to use some of the dependencies we installed, just like the React Native elements. So with this one, it's like a bootstrap with React Native, pretty much. So we get a ton of components, and we just we can use them. So for example, the one we're going to use right now is going to be the input. So you just add the component input, you're going to get an input just right away. That's pretty much the whole idea. And then, of course, you can do buttons, you can do headers just like this. You can do cards. You can do a bunch of things. So this one is super cool. And another thing that you can do, you can add icons. So, you can add icons. Now, what you get, and this one, remember, it's using React Native vector icons. So this is a third-party library. This library, what it does, it gives you access to pretty much all the main fonts, icons, the icon sets that we can use. And if you're not sure which ones you want or the name of the icon we want to use, you can go to React Native vector icons, and they give you a link. Let me just find the link right here. It says browse all. So this is a web page where you can filter or you can find all the different fonts within the same library. So you get undesign or, typo, you get, difference. And of course, if you can filter if you wish. Let's say that you want an icon for email. So you can say email and, you get different types. And I'm telling you this because if you want to add an email, you need to know the name of the icon. If not, this is just not going to work. All right. So I'm going to leave this one open just in case. But what we're going to use, it's React Native elements mainly. And then we're going to use Formic, right? So to validate everything and just make sure everything is cool. If you don't know how to use Formic, don't worry. I'm going to put on the description a couple of links so you can go and learn how to use Formic. Don't worry. Okay, so let's begin with this. I'm going to go right here, and we already installed native elements and we already installed Formic. So we just need to start just requiring right here to importing. So we need to import, and then we need to import Formic. So let me just get it first. And it's going to be from Formic, of course, and then Formic. Now, maybe since this course needs to be very small, remember we only got a couple of hours on Udemy for free courses. Maybe I'm going to edit some of the sections. So if you see something jumping, let's say I start creating the import so that you're going to see it finish. I'm going to do a little bit of editing just to save some time. Because if I'm doing this and I'm passing the 2 hours, it will be a shame not to, upload this. Okay, so what else? We are importing Formic and Yup, and we are going to use them in a minute. Now, another thing that I'm going to be using is going to be React Native elements. So I'm going to go and say import, then from, and then React Native elements. And what I'm going to need on this component is going to be the input component. We are going to use a button. We're going to use something called list items, and then we're going to use something called text. So the text is just like a title on the HTML word, just a title. Now, okay, so of course we're getting an error. Of course, notice that right now this elements, it's importing a component called text, and from React Native, we already have something called text. So I'm not going to use the React Native one. I'm going to use this one. And this is how React Native works. It just works with components. That's how it works. Okay. So right now, the stage number 1 is a pretty dumb component. We are not doing anything. Remember, we need the context. We're going to go through the context every time. So I'm going to go and bring the main context, right? Remember the name, main context. And of course, I'm going to need to import it from .. and then context, right? No errors. Right, so of course, the way we get just to get access to the context on a functional component is going to be bringing the use context. So we're going to be use and then context. Right, so I'm going to go right here. And since this is a hook, I'm going to need to put it on its own instance. So context. And this one, of course, use context. Cool. Now, of course, we need to pass what is the context that we want to use. Well, we have it right here. That's it. So now, of course, let's say that if we do a console log and we want to console log the context, we should be getting the state, right? The same state we are getting right here. Now, if you don't know how to view the logs on the device, what you can do on Mac for iOS, Command and D, and the debug will open a new tab on the screen. So you can go to inspect, and you're going to get the console right here. And on Android, it's just a little bit different. What you need to do is to command and then the letter M or control or alt. It's alt, the letter M. And then you do debug. So I'm already have it open on the iOS. I'm not going to open the Android. And notice that we get the stage. And this is coming from stage number 1. All right, so at least the context is just working, right? We get access to the state. All right. So, all right, so let's just go back. Let me just go back right here to the simulator. Oh, here it is. So, okay, so, all right, so what we want to do, let me just show you the final again. We want to show a title. We want to show an input with an icon and then with a button. All right, so I'm going to go right ahead and I'm going to start building all of this. And remember again, if you don't know Formic, check the links I gave you. Learn Formic and then just come back. So, okay, so just to start, remember we just need the input and the button. That's the main thing. So we need to create kind of a form. And this is going to be within the component of Formic. Now, Formic needs a couple of things just to start. We need an initial values. And remember, we are adding a player, just the name of a player. So this could be name or, whatever. In this case, I'm going to call it player. You could call this whatever you want. Then, of course, at one point when we are done and we want to add that player to the list, we need to use a function to catch that with an onSubmit. So this is going to go and trigger a callback function. Now, this callback function has access to the values, which is going to be the name of the player, right? Okay. So at the end of the day, we also need to reset the form. So we do get a method called reset form. And don't worry, we're gonna see how this one works in a minute. Now, of course, what we need to do is add validation, and I'm going to do it right now so we can get it out of the way. Formic can work with something called Yup. Yup, right here, is a third-party library, and it says that simple object schema validation. So pretty much what we can do with this is that we can define the schema validation schema in this case, and we can pass some rules. We can say, all right, so the user, when they add a string, it needs to be minimum of something. And then we can add an error message if we want. So let me just show you how this works. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say validation schema. Right, so this is the main thing. Remember, we are importing Yup. So I'm going to open and close and I'm going to say, okay, so now the validation schema is going to be ruled by the Yup object. So what we do, we just pass an object. Now, remember, in the future, maybe you can have a form with a lot of things right here. Let's say that you have a player, you have a name, you have, I don't know, something else right here. You have other properties. So right here, you can just say, okay, so the player property needs to be valid, needs to be required, needs to be a minimum of 10 characters. So you're going to pass all the rules on each input. Okay, in this case, we just have one. So I'm going to go and delete this. All right, so the way we do this is we need to say Yup, and we need to say that this is a string, of course, and then we need to change different rules, chain different rules. I'm going to say min, open and close. So each rule has its own, set of properties. In the case of min, we have a limit, and then we have a message. So I'm going to go right here, and I'm going to say, all right, so the minimum amount of characters for a player is going to be 3. And of course, if this fails, I want to show an error message, something like must be more than 3 characters, right? So let's say that we also want to max. Well, same thing. I'm just going to copy this line. I'm going to go right here at the bottom, and I'm going to say, all right, so the maximum amount of characters for a name is going to be 15. And I'm going to say must be, maybe less than something. Must be, let me just delete this, be less than 15, something like that. All right. And of course, the input is going to be required. So we get the good old required right here. And if it's not, we are just submitting, or maybe in this case, adding the player without adding a name, we're going to throw a different error saying, sorry, the name is required. Cool. So now we have the initial value. We have all the different, properties right here we need for Formic. Now, the way that Formic works is that when you include this component, everything that's going to be children of this Formic component is going to receive some properties. So when you open and close Formic, what you need to return is open and close, and we return a function that returns some JSX. I know it looks weird, but this is the way it works. We are just returning a function that returns JSX. Now, this function has some properties right here, has some arguments. And these arguments, we're going to do a little bit of destructuring, and we're going to get them from here. So what are we going to put right here? Well, we're going to put the title, the input, and everything else. So for now, I'm just going to do some template strings. So from here, if you're importing Formic, I'm going to go, and by default, we're going to get the auto-completion of all the methods we have available. So we have the handle change, for example. We have the handle blur. We have the handle submit. We have the values. We have the touched, and you will need to add them as well, right? And then we have the errors. Now, if you don't know how this works, don't worry, I'm going to show you in a minute. But remember, we are just including Formic that returns something, which is a function that has access to some methods, and then at the end of the day is going to return some JSX. All right, so if again I reload the application, notice that right here, everything still works, right? Everything still works. And if I do reload, we get no errors. Well, of course, it's a blank page because we are not doing anything, but we don't get an error. So what I want to do right here, let's say that I'm going to go and put the text, which is going to be the main logo of the application. The name is Who Pays the Bill. We're going to make this better in a couple of sections. I'm going to say who, let me do it correctly, who pays the bill. Right. So we get it. Cool. All right. So what do I want to do? I want to do an input. If we go to the documentation of React Native Elements, we can clearly see that right here, input, this is what we need to do, right? This is what we need to do. But notice that we want to add an icon. So we're going to need to do something like this. All right, so let's just go and do it. We are already importing input from React Native Elements. So I'm going to go right here at the bottom and I'm going to start adding the input. So I'm going to say, okay, so we are going to be creating an input, open and close. It's a self-closing tag. So we can add a placeholder. Let me do placeholder. I'm going to say, okay, so something like, I don't know, add names here. All right. All right. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to define a left icon. Now, the way that this works is that we need to open and close and we need to pass an object. So the first thing is going to be the type of icon. Now, remember with this one, let me see if I can find it. We might find or use different fonts. So we need to specify the font. Right. So that's the type. I'm going to use the ant design. You can use whatever you wish. And then, of course, we need to add the name. So the name, I'm gonna go and say add user. So if I go right here and look it up, let me put this here. This is the icon I want to use. Notice that it's just pretty much the same. Cool. So if I save it, we should be getting something super ugly, but we get it. Notice that everything still works. So on the documentation, you get all of the properties right here that you can use with the input. And some of them are just to add some stylings, just to modify how this shows. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say input. And let me just do it correctly. I'm going to put it and say input and container style. This is going to modify the container that it's wrapping the actual input. So the only thing I want to do, I want to add some margin. I'm going to say margin horizontal 50, and I'm going to add a little bit of margin top, margin and then top. All right, there we go. Just a little bit better. Right, so at one point we are going to get errors. So of course, to get errors, we need to use Formic right here. We need to learn how to use Formic. And the way that the Formic works is that we need to, of course, to link this input to the player that we are creating right here in this player. And the way we do it, I'm going to go right here and say on change text. So this is the on change property we get from React Native Elements. So we need to go and remember we are importing a lot of methods right here. So the change is going to be handled by the handle change, and we need to put the name of what we are using right here. So if this is player, this is going to handle the change of player. Then we get the on blur. So on the on blur, open and close, we have a handle blur. So open and close. And we're going to copy the player. Same thing. Notice again, handle blur. All right. So the next thing is going to be, and let me do this correctly. There we go. The next thing is going to be who's going to, handle the value. So all of this is going to be handled by the values property that we get right here. And right here, we get the player. Right. And I'm getting something weird. I don't know. What is that? It's okay. So values and player. Cool. All right. Notice that everything still works. Cool. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to be adding a button. So a button, open and close. And of course, we do a self-closing tag. So the button on React Native styles, and remember this one comes from React Native elements. You could use the button from React Native, the button that we have, we could do something like this, but it's just a different button. At the end of the day, the React Native elements uses the original button, but we can do a lot of things on the top. So I'm gonna go button style opens, and I'm gonna go right here, and the button. Let me just comment this one first. The button, at least, it needs a title at least. If we don't add a title on a button, is going to give us an error back, right? So we get the button. Now, the way that we can trigger something from this button, we can trigger an action, is going to be with the onPress property, right? So onPress. So this one is just a function. Let's say that I want to do an alert and saying something like, I don't know, submitting or something like that, or hello. When I do an onPress, we are going to get the alert of hello. Super easy. So React Native is just super easy. Now remember, what do we want to do? We want to submit the form when we click the button, right? So notice that we get handle submit. So we handle everything through Formic. So every time we submit the form, we're going to go through the handle submit, right? And for now, I'm going to go and leave this one comment because we're going to go to the next section and we're going to complete all the styles and everything else. So for now, if I click, for now, nothing happens. And it's because we need to add the errors right here. We need to show some errors and a little bit of validation. But behind the scenes, it's already doing the validation. What is happening is that we don't get anything right here. So I'm going to go, and every time that we do an onSubmit, I want to do an alert of values. You're going to see why in a minute. So every time we submit, if the form is correct, if the input is correct, we should be doing this alert. That's what the onSubmit is going to do. Since I'm going to go and just delete all of this, I'm going to go and click and notice that we don't get an alert. And it's because this input, it's invalid. If I do 1, 2, 3, remember we need at least 3 characters, we are going to get the alert because it works. And the object is the data that we get right here. All right, so, that's good. We get a working form at least on this one. So let's go to the next section and let's keep going with this. And we're going to store the players on the actual context. All right, so welcome back. And in this one, what I want to do, I want to display a couple of error messages right here. So the way we get, and this is with the input the React Native Elements API, right? With this library. So what we get in this one, and maybe I'm going to go and put it right here, is we get a couple of properties, for example, render error message, and then we get another one that is going to be the actual error message, and we can pass the values of what we want to render if we have errors, and that one is going to go and get displayed right here at the bottom. Super cool. So the render error message is a Boolean. This one is going to be true or false. So if it's true, of course, it will go and display whatever we put right here. Now, again, we are using Formic, and the errors, the messages, they come from here. So how does it work? Again, so if you remember, if you need a little bit more about Formic, go to the links I gave you earlier. All right. So the render error message needs to know if this is true or false. And the way we get to know is within the errors right here that we get from Formic. So this one is just an object. But if we get some errors within that object, is going to create a player property, a property with a player with the name of the input that we are using. And as a value is going to put whatever error message we have. So what we can do is we can say, okay, so if, let me just find it. There we go. If the errors and the player is true, then it's going to be true. Now, another property that we get is that it's going to be the touched right here. And this one is going to be, again, true or false. If this is touched or not touched, because I don't want to start getting error messages if the user, it's not in the actual input, right? So I want to use the touched and I want to use the player. And then what we need to do, we need to pass the error, the actual message, what comes from here. So this is actually the errors and then player. So that's it. Now, the style is going to show, the error is going to show a little bit, funny. So we do get an error style property. So we can pass some, let's say CSS stylings between quotes, and we can provide a little bit of, just to make it a little bit better. I'm going to go and give it a little bit of margin. So if I go and delete this, notice that we are start getting the error message. Sorry, the name is required. If I do just one, must be more than 3 characters, and so on and so on. All right, so super nice, super nice. So I want to add a little bit of stylings to this button because it looks like crap. I'm gonna go and create a button style for this one. And I'm gonna say that the styles are gonna come from styles.button. Of course, what you can do in real life, in your life, with your applications, you can provide the styles right here on the style property, right here. And you can do what we've been doing, just add some inline stylings, just like, again, we've been doing right here. So, but in this case, what I want to do, I want to define a property with this one, just like we are doing right here. I want to create a style sheet create. So I'm going to go and notice that we are already importing style sheet. So I'm going to go right here at the bottom and I'm going to say, okay, so we are creating a style sheet create, open and close. Now the name of the property is going to be button. So I'm going to go and say that now we have a button, and this button is going to be, I'm going to set the background color, and they're going to say that the color is going to be DB, then 3EB1. Cool. And I'm going to add a little bit of margin top because it's too close to the errors, to the error message. And now, of course, we get it, and we get that nice, pink. And if I add a player, notice that we are showing the errors again. All right, so, one thing less to do. Now, what I want to do is that if everything is cool, right, the input is valid, we want to add a player and add that player to the list, right? Just go to the context and add the player. All right, so if we want to do this through the context, we need to create a property, a function from the context and export it and get it from here. So I'm going to go to the context and just do it. And of course, if you don't know how to do this, don't worry, you're going to get it by example. So I'm going to create a function on the provider. Notice I'm on the provider on the actual context. I'm going to say add player handler. You can call this whatever you wish. Add player and then handler. And this one, what it's going to do is going to receive a name, and then it's going to add it to the state of players. So it's going to get a name as an argument. So this one, what it's going to do, it's going to say this, and it's going to set the new state. Now remember, we need to grab whatever we had from before and add the new name, because maybe we already have names right here and we want to add them, to the list, and to the list. So, okay. So again, I'm going to open and close, and I'm going to go and say, all right, so we do have a previous state, and this is just a standard React, right? Now, of course, then I'm going to go and say props. Cool. I'm going to go open and close, and I'm going to say that when I enter the players, what I want to do, I want to make a combination of the default state of players, which is ... players state, and then just players, the previous state and players. And then, of course, I want to add the name. This is just another way of doing this. Now, of course, we need to call this function to do all of this work, and we need to pass the argument. So, of course, we need to go right here at the bottom, and I'm going to say, all right, so the add player handler, we need to call it somehow. So I'm going to call it add player. This is the property I'm going to be passing to the children's. So whenever we call this, we trigger this function, we call that one, we want to do and execute the add player handler. That's what we want to do. All right. Now, of course, since this is on the context, this add player is going to be part of the stage 1 and the context. So what I can easily do right here is say, all right, so context, then add player. Let me just do add player. And I'm going to be passing whatever I get on values. And this, remember that this one is an object. So I'm going to say the values and then player. And at the end of the day, I want to reset the form. And this is a method that we get from Formic. Whenever we call this function is going to clear the input value. That's it. So I'm going to go and say, I don't know, James or something like that. I'm going to add the player, and notice that we are not getting any error messages. Now, if I go to the debugger, maybe we are going to get it, maybe not. Let me just do something right here. I'm going to go and I'm going to say console log, and I'm going to console log the context. And just to see if we get something. So notice we get the state and we get the function, right? Cool. So I'm going to go and say, I don't know, whatever. maybe James or something like that, James. And we are getting the state, the new instance, and they're going to go and say state. So we get James and we get James. So, just the two names we added. Forgot, I added James twice, but that's fine. So let me just reload the application and do it again. So if you're on iOS and you cannot reload it with command and the letter R, that something doesn't work, you can go to the input and select send keyboard input to device. And this one is going to give you an easier way to do the reloading. And on Android, I forgot to tell you, it's double tap the letter R. You just double tap it. That's it. So let me do something. Again, I'm going to do James. And on this one, I'm going to do Mike, whatever. I'm going to add the player. Let's see if we get the state. And we get it, James and Mike. Cool. So now we just need to do the same thing. We just need to access to the context from within stage 1. And I want to start showing the players, the list of players. So, okay, let's do this super simple and super quick. I'm going to go right here. And now if you want to return many elements, this is still React. You're going to get an error message. So we are going to need to wrap the whole thing on some fragments. Cool. So what I want to do, I want to just show a view if we start getting players, right? And then, of course, later we're going to show the list of players. So I'm going to just show a view and I'm going to add some dumb stylings just to get something a little bit better. I'm going to add a little bit of padding just like this. I'm going to add a width just like this, and it's going to be 100%, right? So I'm going to go and I'm going to just return some content only if we have some players. So remember, everything is on the context and everything is on players, and we are already passing the state to this component. So we do have access. So I'm going to say, all right, so if on the context and on the state and on the players, we do have something, I'm going to do something. If not, I'm going to do something else. So I'm going to go and we're going to show something. If not, we're not going to show anything. Now, I also want to show and make sure that we do have something. So I'm going to go and still access to the context. I'm going to access to state and then again, players, just like this. And I'm going to check for the length. So we need to make sure that we have at least one, right? So it's going to be length greater than 0. Simple as that. If we do have at least one player, then we want to show something. If not, we are not going to show anything, right? Just, again, standard React. Now, if we do have something, I'm going to, for now, just show a tiny text. And this one is going to be called, I don't know, list of players. And I think I made a mistake including the component. Maybe not. All right. So let's see if we get something. If I type a name, I'm going to get the title at least. And we do. Right. Cool. So let's just go back. Now, since we are going to get an array of players, the only thing we need to do is just to loop them and show them. So I'm going to go and I'm going to create a function just to do this. I'm going to call it render players. Now, you can call this whatever you wish. It's completely up to you. Now, we don't have this function, of course. So I'm going to go at the very top and we're going to start creating all of this. For now, I'm just going to remove that one. All right. So the render players, the only thing it's going to do is just going to access the state of players and do a tiny map. So I'm going to go and say const. Let me do this correctly. Const and render players. And this one is going to be just a function that at the end of the day is going to return some JSX. So, okay, so this one will need to access context. It needs to access state and needs to access players and plural players. So we just do a map. Now the map is going to do just a function, and at the end of the day is going to return more JSX, right? All right. So on each iteration, we're going to have access to an item and then to the ID of the item, right? The iteration number, which is cool. Now I'm going to use, just to get something a little bit cooler, I'm going to use the list item component that we get from React Native Elements, which is going to be something like this. Now, this is super customizable. We are going to do something really simple, just to get it going. So I'm going to go right here and notice that we are already importing the list item. All right. So I'm going to go and say list item, right? Open and close. Now, the list item, or this element that we are putting right here, because it's inside of a map, we need a key. Now, in real life, if you're bringing something from a server or something, from a server, it means that you have an ID. So in this case, I'm just going to use the iteration number. You in real life need to do something a little bit better than just putting the iteration number. All right, the index number. So on this one, we get some properties like bottom divider, and you can check it on the documentation, of course. It cannot do a lot of explaining because if not, I'm going to reach the 2 hours. Yeah, that's the problem. That's good. So we're going to go and do style, right? Style of 100%. It's going to be like 100% big, right? So what are we going to do now? Well, what we need to do, we need to add the list of players. So I'm going to go, and this component has a list item, and we can do a chevron. Notice right here. This is just going to be an icon. And then, of course, we have the list item component, and we get the content component. And on this one, of course, we have items and we have titles if you want, or if you must. Now, of course, right here, you can add whatever you want. You can even do a text right here if you wish. So let's say that I'm going to go and say text and then item, just like this. And of course, if I add something, we should be getting something at least. And notice we do. We get a list of players, and then we get James in this case. And if I add another one, let's say, I don't know, Mike, just like this, we get Mike. So everything works. Now you get a list item title as well. I'm gonna use that one. I'm gonna go and do opening and closing, of course. And this one is gonna be title. So let me do it correctly. Title, and then title. And of course, we need to put the item inside. So I'm going to go and say item. Cool. So if we reload it, no, it's just a little bit bigger. That's it. Just a little bit bigger. Now, another thing that we need to do is that we need to delete the players. If we want delete players, I want to press or do something right here to tap and delete the player. Now, the thing is that if you do a simple on press, like we did previously, as soon as the user presses the user, we are going to delete it. And sometimes maybe they're just, making a mistake. They don't want to delete the user. They just, are maybe scrolling or, moving through the screen. So you're going to start deleting users by mistake. And this is the property on press. So now let's say I do on press, and notice it's super quick. As soon as I press it, we get the alert. And this is going to be the action of deleting the user. Now, of course, I don't want to do this. What I want to do, we get another one that's called on long press. So the long press, of course, is going to be a long press. So I'm going to go and notice that even though if I, touch it, nothing happens. I need to press and hold. And only then it's going to go and fire the function. Right, so what is going to be this function? Well, this function is going to delete the user. So we don't have a user function just to delete this. I'm going to do it right now. Maybe the video went too long, but let's finish it right now. So I'm going to be creating a function on the context. I'm going to call it remove and then player. And remember, we are removing elements from an array of elements. So the only thing we need to know is we need to know the position of that player on that list. So we get it on the index. Right. So now, of course, we need to create a function that will just remove the player, because right now, if we call this, nothing is going to happen. We're going to get an error, right? Okay. So I'm going to go copy this, and we're going to go to the context and create the function. Go down and remember how are we calling this? Is remove player. So for this one, I'm going to create, let me just do it correctly. I'm going to create a this remove player handler. No, this is the way we do it. So I'm going to go just copy this one. I don't want to type everything again. So I'm going to call it remove player handler. This is the function. I'm going to go and I'm going to say, all right, so every time we call this function, we want to do something. What do we want to do? Well, we are getting the index, right? The position of that player on the array. So I'm going to go and create a new array and just replace arrays later. So I'm going to say new array. Now, of course, this is just going to be a dumb JavaScript operation, so you can do whatever you wish right here. I'm going to make a copy of the list of the players. I'm just making a copy, right? Just making a copy. So now I'm going to enter the new array, and I'm going to remove the player that we want to remove. So I'm going to say splice, right? And of course, on the supplies, we need to let the application know what is the element. So it's going to be this index. How many elements we want to remove? Just one. All right. So then at the end of the day, we just need to set the new state. And whenever we set the new state, this is going to update the state of the stage. And we're going to see the changes going on the screen. So players, and it's going to be equal to the new array of players. So that's it. Let's give it a test. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go and notice that sometimes it says that remote debugger, it's just may cause apps to perform slowly. It's just, it's memory. Of course, don't worry about that. I'm going to go and do, I don't know, James, whatever. I'm going to do Mike. All right, so let's say that I made a mistake on this one because it's all caps. I press and hold and it goes away. Super cool. And then I'm going to go and just add it again. James. All right. Let's do one more time. I'm going to do Ron. And let's test it again. I'm going to do Ron, press and hold, and it goes away. Right. Okay, so everything cool. Let's go to the next section and let's start finishing all of this. We need to add the button. We need to make sure that we have at least one more player, and we're going to use toasts. So let's go to the next one and do all of this. All right, so welcome back, and let's just keep going. Now, if you think about it, this is it. This is pretty much the whole application. Entering the users and just adding them to a list. Then we get a random user, and that's it. There you go. You have an application. So, okay, so right now we need to add a button, and we need to press the button. Let me just show you right here. We need to get the loser. So if we tap or we press and get the loser, we're going to get the loser out of this. Now, the problem is that we need to make sure that the list of players is a list at least 2, right? Okay, so we don't have an action for this. So I'm going to go and just do it. I'm going to go to the stage number 1 component. What happened? Let me delete this. What? All right. So I'm going to go to stage number 1. And remember, every time we click a button, we want to go to the next stage. So I'm going to go right here after the list of players, and I'm going to add a new button. So I'm going to go and say button, of course, open and close. And we need actually, we can do it a self-closing tag. Now I'm going to define the button style, and I can reuse the same stylings. And you know what? I'm going to copy this one and put it right here. I don't need to type everything again. So on this one, instead of doing the handle submit, I'm going to do something else. So I'm going to go and just trigger some other function. So this function is going to go to the context and is going to trigger some other function, some other method. I'm going to call it next because with this one, we want to go to the next stage. All right. So this one, I'm going to call it get the loser. Cool. And that's it. We can get the loser. Now, of course, if I tap it, we're going to get an error because we don't have this method. So I'm going to go to the context and just do it. So remember, this one is going to be called next. And everything we are doing right now is we called this. And then, of course, we could call it next handler if you must, or handle next or something like this. So next handler. All right. So we don't have this function. I'm going to go right here and say that the next handler, it's going to do something. Now, this one, what do we need to do on this one? Well, the only thing we need to do is just check if the list of players is at least 2 players, and then change the stage from 1 to 2. That's pretty much it. That's pretty much the whole deal. Okay, so I'm going to go right here, and when we detect it, I'm going to access the players. I'm going to say this one is equal to the state. And I'm doing this so I don't have to do the state that players every time. All right, so I'm going to do a dumb if-else statement, just a dumb if-else. And I'm going to be checking the players. Now, if the players and the length of the players is less than 2, then we want to show an error message because we don't have enough players. If it's less than 2, I'm going to alert error. We're going to do something better in a minute, but for now, I'm just going to alert and get this going. Now, of course, if everything is cool, it means that we have more than 2 players. I'm going to go and do set state, and I'm going to change the stage to the number 2. Right. So let's see if we get something at least on this one. Let me just reload the application. And okay, that's fine. Let's add it. I'm going to say James. All right, so we get James. Now, if I get the loser, we are going to get length of undefined. And, oh, of course, it's players. Right, so players and players. Let's try again. So I'm going to reload the application because it's taking us to a different stage. Now, if you're getting problems and if you're working on iOS, remember by checking on input and output input set keyboard, you can do the Command R and you're going to get a little bit easier. I mean, the reloading. So I'm going to go and say James. I'm going to add and say Mike, right? So now, let me just try we don't have enough players. I'm going to get the loser and we get it. That error, right? And I'm going to go and do Mike and I'm going to say Mike. And now we have enough players. We should be going to stage 2. All right, so that works. Now I'm going to close the debugger. It really sucks. There's a better way of using debugger, but right now this one sucks. So, all right, there we go. So let's go back. So now we can show an error message if we are able to, go to the next stage. Cool. So now what I want to do something else. I want to show a toast right here at the bottom. And we didn't install this, if I remember correctly. No, we didn't do it. So there's a library that we can install from React Native where we can show toasts. Let me just show you the library on the web. I'm going to go right here and just paste it right here. So this is it, React Native toast messages. Now on the React Native world, whenever you install dependencies, if these dependencies, they don't need anything native from the phone, like contacts or accessing images or accessing the camera or something like that, you don't need to restart the simulator. If you install a library that needs some of those resources, you need to restart the simulator to kill the terminal that you have right here and restart it. Now, if you're interested again more in React Native, I do have a full, supersized course about React Native. Just check it out. All right, so this is what we're going to do. We need to install React Native toast message. All right, so I'm going to go right here. I'm going to do npm install and then React Native toast message minus save. It's just going to take a second. All right, so everything got installed. Now, the way we use this, everything, of course, is on the documentation. What we need to do, we need to create a main container on the root part of your application at the very top, right? This is the container. And then from within your components, you can call toast show, and it will show a toast. Cannot be easier than that. So I'm going to go and just do it. I'm going to go and the main part, the main start of our application is this one. And since we already have this provider, and we can, bring the toasts. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say import. And you know what? I can copy from here. So I don't need to type everything. So import toast from React Native toast message. So right here, they give you the example. You could do the same thing to me. You can just copy the content. So again, we need a container. That's it. This is the container, and it's working on the upper part of the application, on the top part of the application. So every time we call toasts, the toast will know what to do. So, okay, so I'm going to go back to the context. Remember, if we get an error, I want to show a toast. That's the main thing. So I'm going to go and copy again that import because we are going to need to bring it right here to the context, the component. And every time, again, we get an error, we're going to show a toast. So I'm going to go right here at the bottom. I'm going to say toast, just like this. And I'm going to say show. That's the method. Now, of course, you can pass a lot of configuration options right here. So you can define the text too, but you can also do the auto hide, do a callback function, set the position, or set the type. And this is important because you have 3 main different types: success, error, and info. And it makes sense. Now what we need to do is show an error. So I'm going to use that type. So I'm going to go right here and I'm going to say that the type is going to be error. Then a comma, and I'm going to define the position. Let me do it correctly. Position. All right. And the position, I'm going to put it on the bottom. And of course, then we need to define the text number 1 and the text number 2. Now, maybe you're thinking, why do you get two texts? One is kind of the title, the main title, and the other one is the content. So on this one, I'm going to say sorry and just add something dumb like you need at least 2 players. Something dumb. All right, so I'm going to go and reload the application and see if we can get it to go. And it seems like I'm making a mistake somewhere. Let me just double check. You know what? I know what it is. I'm going to go right here and to the actual index. This one, I'm just adding some string. And notice how sensible is just React Native. So there you go. Okay, I'm going to go and say James. I'm going to add the player. So if I get the loser, we get the toast. Right. So again, just super simple. Make sure you read the documentation if you want to get something else out of this. Now, let's say that you don't like this style, the layout of this one. You can do your own custom ones. Right here, you get the customizing the toast types, and you can define a configuration where you can define your own custom. And whatever you put inside here or you return, it's going to be the actual toast. So super cool library. Okay, so let's just keep going. What do we need to do now? We need to do the font. We're going to do it maybe on the next section because, again, I told you it's just a little bit weird. So if I go now and if I do mic and add a player, we can go to the next stage. So we're going to go to the next one and get the next stage going. All right, so welcome back, and on this one we're gonna go and just finish this stage number 2. All right, so let's go back. I'm gonna go to the context. Remember, every time we just click next, we go to the stage number 2, and we want to show the loser, right? We want to do that math operation with the list of players. So this is gonna happen right here after we set the state. Now, I don't want to generate the loser when we are setting the state or before we set the state. I want to generate a loser after we set the stage to the number 2. All right, so I'm going to go right here. And on the set state, we can define the callback. This is something we get from React, of course. And I'm going to go and I'm going to do this, generate, and then loser. This is going to be the name of my function or the name of the function we're going to create in a minute just to generate the loser. And this is going to be super simple because we just need to get a random value from an array. That's pretty much the function. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to say generate loser and open and close. Right. Now, of course, I'm going to do pretty much the same thing I did previously. So I don't need to do this, the stated players. So remember, what do we need to do? We need to get a random value, a random player. And we already have the result. So we need to grab a random one and put it on result. So I'm just going to do it inside of this state just to save some time. I'm going to do this, that set, and then state, open and close. And this is just an object, and I'm going to go and put it on the result. Now, what we need to do is just a dumb random operation on JavaScript. I'm going to access players, open and close. I'm going to do math. I'm going to do floor, just like this, open and close again. So remember, we need to go and do math again, random. And at one point, we're going to need to multiply right here by the players and that length. Just, a simple dumb random from an array. All right, so of course, this is going to go and put it on the result. I've disabled the debugger, so, we're going to check it on the stage number 2. Now, when we go to the stage number 2, I, have it right here. Let me just close this one. And I'm going to close this one. We are not going to use it anymore. On the stage number 2, we also need access to the context, just like we are doing right here, because we need to get the values. We need to get the loser. So, I'm going to just go and do the same thing. I'm going to import the context right here, and I'm going to go and copy so we didn't have to type everything again. I'm going to say, all right, so this is my context. So I'm going to go right here, do some, fragments, and I want to show a text saying, I don't know, the loser is, and then the loser. So I'm going to go and add another text, And this one is going to be, remember, that we get it on the context. So let me just do it correctly. We access to the context. We go to state because we have it right there. And then we go to result. So we should be getting the loser at least. It's going to be super ugly, but it's going to work. So James and then Mike. All right, let's get the loser. And I made a mistake. Of course, I'm not importing the use context. All right, so use context. All right, let's try again. I'm going to do, and you know what? Sometimes we just don't need to type everything again. Maybe we can add them by default so we don't type every time we want to test this. We need to add names. So okay, the loser is Mike or Mike's. Cool. So yeah, all right. So it works. Now, of course, it looks super ugly. And what we want to do, we want to restart the application or get a new user or restart the game because it's just a game. All right. So we don't have these functions. I'm going to do them right now. Why not? I'm going to go create a button and I'm going to use, you know what? First, let me delete it. And I'm going to use the button from React Native Elements. So I'm going to copy this and just import the things I need. I'm going to import the button right here. So I'm going to go and then bring the first button, open and close. And remember, on the buttons, we need at least a title. And I'm going to call this try again because it's just going to be the button for try again. And then, of course, on the on press, we're going to do something. So on press, and we're going to open and close, and we're going to just trigger a function. And on this one for now, I'm going to do an alert. Why is, doing that? I don't know. So alert, and let's do try again. Right. So on the other one, I'm going to do pretty much the same. So I'm going to go copy, paste, and this one is going to be start over. So start and then over. All right. So let me just copy this and paste it right here. Now, what I would like to do is to get the stylings of the button out of the way, just to get the, the stylings out of the way. Styles, and then I'm going to go styles. Notice that I get the autocomplete, and it's because I'm not importing, I'm not doing any style sheet, and I get an error right now. It's because we need to do a style sheet create. I'm going to go right here at the bottom, say const styles, and then style sheet, and then create, open and close. Right. So I'm going to go and create a button style. I'm going to set the background color to, I don't know, some color. I'm going to do 41B6 and then E6. That's the color. And I'm going to add a little bit of margin and then top, right? And I'm going to add a comma. Forgot to do this. All right. So let me just do it like this, margin and then top. Cool. I'm going to add 20 pixels. All right, so let's see if, it looks a little bit better. Oh, I'm going to go and add this one to the second button. All right, let's see if, again, this looks a little bit better. Now, I'm going to go because I'm tired to adding the names right here on the list. Now, remember, all of this happens or works because we have it on the context. So if we want to go right here and add some defaults, we should be getting it, right? So James and, I don't know, Mark, something like that. Mark. All right. Right, so if I get the loser, we can go to the next stage and we get the buttons. Right, so let me add a little bit of styling to this name. Let's say we can maybe make the fonts a little bit bigger, just a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go to here and I'm going to add a new styles. And maybe what we can do is to, I don't know, set a font size. And I'm going to do it right here just to save some time. Margin top. And let's say that I want to do a little bit of this and I'm going to do a font size and, just a little bit bigger. All right. It's still ugly, but you can do much better in your life, of course, in your applications. Right now, I'm just doing everything super quick so we can fit on the 2 hours mark. All right. So everything is cool. Now, of course, we need to create this function. So let's do them right now. So the try again is going to be get a new loser. So we need to just redo the same thing we've been doing. So right here, it's just getting the loser. We just need to get a loser. So we can reuse the same function, right? Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to do it simple. So I'm going to copy this one, and I'm going to go right here at the bottom, and I'm going to say reset game. Actually, I'm going to do get the new loser first. Get new and then loser. And every time we want to do this, what do we want to do? We want to get a new loser. So generate loser. That's it. We don't need to create a new function for this. So now, of course, on the stage number 2, since we do have access to the context, we just can call it. It's going to go right here, and they're going to say context and get new loser. Let me do it correctly. It's context, and I don't know what's going on with the autocomplete this, today. So get new loser. Right. So I'm going to get a loser. I'm going to try again, and we get James. Now, of course, in real life, you should be creating a new function, because notice that sometimes I do try again and I'm not getting anything. And it's because it's doing the random stuff that we we did, right? It's just doing this, but it's stopping on the same user. So maybe you just want to create something a little bit more sophisticated, that it will not give us back a repeated user, or maybe the last user on the state. We could do something like that. So then we're going to need to start over. And now what do we need to do with this one? So I'm going to go here, and I'm going to call it, I don't know, reset game, something like that. Reset and then game. All right. So I'm going to do this and then reset game. Or maybe handle reset game. I'm just going to keep the same name, just to keep it simple. So I'm going to go and create this function. Now, if you think about this, what do we need to do right here in order to go back to the main screen, delete all the players, and start over? We just need to set this as default. That's it. We don't need to do much. So I'm going to go, and because we don't have a lot of things going on. If you have a lot of things going on in your application, maybe you need to do a little bit more work. But since on this one, we are handling everything on this that set state, we just can grab the defaults and set it back to default. Simple as that. So I'm going to go and say that now we are back to an empty array. All right, so of course, I'm going to get the loser. We try again. We know that that works. And I'm going to start over. And of course, I forgot to do that. So we are passing the reset game. So I'm going to go to stage number 2. And now this is going to be context of reset game. So reset and then game. Let's see what happens. I'm going to start over, and we are back again to the main screen. Let's see if everything still works. So James, that works. Let's do Mike, right? Let's do a couple more. Ron, and I don't know, Bart, whatever. Right, so I'm going to get the loser, and we get it. We can still try again, and we start over. We just go back. So everything's cool. You know how easy was this? Now, if you think about this, we didn't do a lot of React Native, and it's because on real life, you do a lot of React and a lot of tiny bit of React Native. The challenge on React Native, it's working with dependencies and, doing all that stuff. But just creating a tiny, simple application on React Native is that simple. It's super simple. It's just like doing it with React. All right. So the next thing, it's that we need to install fonts. So let's go to the next one and do that. All right, so welcome back. And in this one, we're going to install fonts. Now, one thing I learned the hard way is that you always with React Native need to create different versions. So store a version of your project beforehand before you install anything. All right, before you do any kind of installation of React Native, just save a version of your project, whether it's a copy of your project on your directory, or whether it's, of course, a better way would be using GitHub, for example, or Git in this case. All right, so let's do some installing. I'm going to go and create, because we need to download the font, right? So you could put the fonts whatever you want. In this case, I'm going to go and create inside source an assets directory, and I'm going to create a directory called fonts. You could, again, put it whatever you want. So we need the fonts. So I'm going to go to Google Fonts, Google, and then fonts, and I'm going to choose the Pacifico. So I'm going to go and say Pacifico. So this is the font I want. Notice that this is the style, right? Okay. So I'm going to select it, And now we need to download the family. So you only get one single style, which is the regular 400. So I'm going to download the family and I'm going to put it on that directory. So let me find it first. All right, so I'm right here on directory. I'm going to go to source. I'm going to go to assets and I'm going to go and put, the font right there. Now, of course, at one point you will need to decompress it just to get the font. So there we go. We get the font. So if we go to the project right now, we are going to have that Pacifico and we're going to get the font right here. Notice that we get it. So I don't want it here. I'm just going to move it back to fonts. Just going to move that font. I'm going to delete the directory and I'm going to delete the zip because we just don't need it anymore. All right. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to delete the zip as well. So the way we use fonts or we install fonts on React Native, it's by creating a new file called React Native config.js. So I'm going to go create a new file on the root directory. Notice that right now I am right here. So I'm going to go and create a root file, which is going to be called reactnative.config.js. So on this one, what we need to do a module and then an export. And this is the new way of adding fonts on this version of React Native, which is the 63 and something, it's in change. So on the 50 version of the 050, we had to do this in a different way. So I'm going to go and do assets and we need to set the directory or where the assets are going to be. So in this case, remember / is going to be source. I'm going to be using assets and then / and we're going to add fonts, right? So this is where the assets and fonts are, right? So I'm going to save that one. Now, what we need to do is we need to do npx React Native link. Now, on previous versions, remember, we needed to do npm React Native link or React Native link, just React Native link. If we do just React Native link, and I'm just giving you a warning, let me just show you right here. Let me do clear. And let me make this a little bit bigger. If we do just React Native link, it's going to create a different problem for us because this is kind of the old way of doing things. Now what we need to do is npx and then React and then native and then link. So this one will go to the fonts and it will do the installation of this font on Android and on iOS. Now, we are going to get a different problem because we are using React Native Elements, and React Native Elements uses the React Native vector icons, which, if you think about them, they are fonts, right? And when we install them through pod install, right? So if we do this, we are going to create duplicates on the iOS instance. So if you're a Windows user and you just use Android, that's fine. You can do npx React Native link and you're not going to get any problems. If you're using iOS, you need to enter Xcode and you need to do some changes. For now, I'm just going to run it and I'm just going to show you what we need to do. So I'm going to go and install all of this. And once we do this, we need to reload the project. We need to restart the project. We need to rebuild everything. So I'm going to terminate this, right? Just going to close it and we're going to need to rebuild it. So let me show you one more thing before we go. So remember before when we did the React Native vector icons, we did pod install and everything else. Well, when we do this, the link, the application will go to Android. It's going to go, notice that I'm on the Android directory. It's going to go to app. It's going to go to source. It's going to go to main. And notice that we have an assets directory. So it's just going and installing all the fonts for us. That's what React Native npx React Native link does. And notice that we are going to get the Pacifico. Notice that we get it right here. So if we use it in our project right now, the application will know on Android and it will work. But on iOS, again, we're going to have a problem. So for now, I've just closed everything. This one is just not working. I'm going to go and rebuild the project. So npm run Android. This is going to go and rebuild the project. Let's see if this works on Android. All right, so we get it right here and notice that we don't get any errors, right? We just don't get them. Now, of course, how can we use this? I'm going to go and just make the application a little bit smaller because it's just like too big for me. And I'm going to go to maybe not the index. I'm going to go maybe right here to the app. Now, you know what? I'm going to go to the stage number 1. So we know that we are displaying this title from within here. There we go. Okay, so now what I want to do, I want to change the font style on this one. So the only thing we need to do, we just need to go to styles and we need to say that this one now it contains a font family of, and you need to copy the name of the font without the extension, right? So I'm gonna go and say this is specific regular. So if I reload the application, notice that we get it. We get that style. Of course, we need to do a little bit more just to get it correctly, just to get something nice right here, but we get it. We are getting the font. Now, if I run iOS right now, we're going to run into a ton of problems. You're going to get errors. So let me just show you what are we going to need to do. Of course, if you're on Mac and you only care if you're working on Mac, you need to open Xcode. All right, so I'm going to go and open Xcode. Let's give it a minute. It's a little bit lazy. So the other thing we need to do is to go and open a project or file. So I'm going to go and open a project or file, and you need to find the iOS directory of your project. So I'm going to go and do so. Right. So right here, I'm going to select the iOS directory. I'm going to go and click open. Now, when you open the iOS project on Xcode for the first time, it's going to take a little while. It's going to take a little while. So the only thing you can do right now is just wait. You're going to need to wait. All right. So after everything it gets processed and the indexing, it's done with all of this nonsense, we can continue. Now, this is very normal when you're working with React Native. You just need to wait, until everything gets built. So then you need to select who pays the bill, which is the name of the project. And notice that right here, you get some options, some general options for your application. So on targets, on general, you're going to get more options right here. So notice if you keep scrolling down right here, you're going to see app, launch images, and then deployment. You're going to, again, just get a lot of options. Now, if you go to build settings or build phases in this case, you're going to get more options. So yeah, you do get a lot of options. Now, remember at the beginning of the course, when we installed React Native Elements, we did pod install to install all the fonts, which are, the icons that we've been using, the React Native icons. So pod will go and do this right here. Notice what it's doing. It's just doing all that job for us. It's copying the React Native vector icon. Hopefully you can see it because I cannot make the screen bigger. But we get all the options, all the fonts for that, for the icons. Now, then when we did npx React Native link, what it did, it went to right here, and it did that job again. Notice that it's adding the icons again. So this is the problem. If you run the application, the application is going to complain, the build is going to complain, saying, dude, you have duplicates on your project. You're trying to use Font Awesome, and you're already using Font Awesome. That's the problem. So what we really need to do right here, notice that right here at the top, we get the Pacifico, which is the last one we added. Well, we just need to delete the other ones and leave the Pacifico one. So I'm going to go, just select right here and click the minus. And it's just going to go and start deleting all of that. And don't forget to stop when you reach Pacifico. If not, you're going to need to do it manually or do it again. So I'm going to go one more, and there we go. We're just going to leave the Pacifico, and that's it. This is going to just go and fix the problem. Right. So now we are just ready to build the application again. I'm going to go and do npm run iOS. Now, this is going to take a little while. All right, so after everything gets built, notice that we do get the fonts. Super cool. All right, so now what we need to do is just to finish this. We need to change a little bit of the stylings and everything else. Now, what I would like to do, I'm going to create a common place where we can use different parts, because if we want to add some styles right here, we're going to do it. We're going to need to do it on here, and we're going to need on the stage 1, and we're going to need to do it on the stage 2. So we need to repeat code. Now, instead of doing that on React Native, actually on any kind of application, you need to have kind of a common place where you can put some code and you can make some reusable code. So I'm going to go and create a utils on a utils directory, and inside I'm going to put a tools.js. So I'm going to create some code and I'm going to export it from here so we can import it on stage 1 and 2 and reuse that code. All right. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to create an import of React. I'm going to bring it from, of course, you guessed it, React. And I'm going to import the text component from React Native. So I'm going to go and say it from React and then native. So there we go. Cool. So I'm going to import the text component, text. And the only thing I want to do right here, I want to export just the function. I'm going to export the const, just like this. And I'm going to call it main logo because, it is the main logo. And this one is going to be just a function that returns a text component, just like this, text. Right. So this one, the only thing, again, it's going to do is going to go who pays the bill. That's it. All right, so this again is the title or the main logo of our application, who pays the bill. But this one, of course, will contain some stylings. So I'm going to go and add some stylings right now. I'm going to open and close. Remember that the font family was, I don't remember the name, was Pacifico Regular. So I'm going to use that one. What else? We're going to change the color. So I'm going to go and say color. This one is going to be DB3 and then EB1. Is that pink-ish color? I'm going to do comma. I'm going to add a little bit of text decoration. And notice that we get line, a color, and style. We get a lot of things. So on this one, I'm going to say line. And I'm going to go and say underline. Then I'm going to go and do the text decoration color. And on this one, we need to set the color for this one. So it's going to be pretty much the same thing for one B6 E6. That's the bluish color. And I'm going to change the font size to, I don't know, 30. So that's some, good. So now since we are exporting all of this, what we can do, we just can import it from the stage 1 and the stage 2 and just reuse the component, right? The same thing we do with React. So let me make this a little bit smaller because it's just too big. So I'm going to import, open and close. Let me do it like this. And it's going to be from that /, then utils, then tools, and the name of the component was called main logo, right? All right, so the only thing we need to do is just copy that name and use it right here. That's it. Oh, main logo. Let me do it like this manually, main logo. That's it. So now when we refresh it, we get it, right? So we do. Cool. We're going to need to do it on the other one, on the stage number 2. So I'm going to go, let me close this. Stage number 2, I'm going to go and import it. And we need to do the same thing. We just need to copy the main logo. And I'm going to go and maybe put it right here. All right, so let's get the loser. And we get it. Super cool. Now let's see if we get it in Android. Of course, it's a little bit different because we do have different stylings. So let me just reload the application. And okay, we get it. Let me just start over. So, okay, notice that it's a little bit different, and it's because on Android and on iOS, we do have different properties. But everything else is just pretty much the same. All right, so let's go to the next one. I'm going to show you a couple more things, very simple things. Maybe I'm going to show you how to target different styles on different platforms, because maybe you don't know, that's fine. And then we are pretty much done. All right, so welcome back. And the application is pretty much done. We don't need to do anything else. Maybe we need to reset this back to defaults, but it's pretty much done. Of course, now, we get some differences between platforms. Now, the biggest difference right now is maybe the margin right here at the top. Notice that this one has a lot of margin and this one not so much. Well, it's because, of course, we are providing a margin top of 80. So you can actually fix this. With React Native, you get something called the platform. So let me just go and bring it platform. So the platform, what it gives us is the ability to check if we are on iOS or we are on Android. So if I go right here and say platform and ask for the OS, this one is going to return the OS version that the application is running. So if I say triple equal and I say iOS, and this is true, this style is going to be applied on iOS, and if not, it's going to be applied on Android. So 80 for iOS, which is 80, and then in Android, notice that this one is now closer to the top. I could do maybe 10 just to prove you this, just to prove this. Right. So that's it. Of course, you can use the platform just to target a bunch of different scenarios. Now, okay, we are pretty much done. I'm going to upload everything to GitHub. So remember, this is going to be the link. I'm going to give you the link. Don't worry. So you can go and download the project. You can compare some code. And you can do, pretty much whatever you want right here. Now, as you can see, just building an application with React Native it's not so different than building an application with React. Of course, we do get the differences of working with CSS and maybe the components, but the idea of how you make an application is pretty much the same. All right, so I'm gonna go. Let me just go to the actual context, and I'm gonna go and reset this back to defaults. I'm gonna go just save it, and let's see if we get a default. And of course, this one is a little bit lazy, the Android. So there we go. All right. So I hope you learned something. You find this course useful, and catch you on the next one.